Hey amazing human beings, and welcome to the A to C Chronic Illness Guide. This is a gentle series exploring the realities of living with a chronic illness. I'm Ali, a chronic illness writer living with endometriosis and adenomyosis, and today we're talking about appointments. So I have 3 talking points regarding appointments, and the first one is how to prepare, advocate and process them emotionally. So one of the big ones, I think, there are 2 big ones, but one of the big ones is definitely writing any questions or symptoms that you have in advance, because I'm sure you've been there many times before that you'll be in an appointment and your brain will blank. You'll have forgotten the questions you wanted to ask or the symptoms that you've been having, or you'll only remember a couple of them, and it can be really disheartening at times, but it's normal and natural and it happens to us all. But yeah, it sucks. So one of the best ways to get around that is to make a note. So I personally love Notion. If you've seen other videos on my channel, you'll have seen how much I use Notion. However, none of my family members use Notion, and I will share my questions and my symptoms and lists with my family members, like my husband, my mum, and some friends occasionally, to get feedback. Am I missing anything? Is there anything that I really need to add that I haven't thought of? Am I missing something that you've realised that I haven't? Because that happens quite often, because we live with our illnesses every single day, and eventually they become normal to us, but they're obviously not normal to other people. So sometimes getting that feedback can be really helpful. So what I do is I have an iPhone, so I share the Notes app. I have a Notes app in there. I have a folder called Health, and I have, right folders for questions and appointments and things like that, because I'm a little bit anal about organising stuff like that. It just makes it easier for me to find for my brain when I'm having brain fog, or I'm asking my husband to find it and stuff on my phone. And what I will do is I will write a full list of everything that I can think of. So basically a big brain dump of symptoms and questions and issues and everything, and just have a big brain dump. And sometimes that's quite therapeutic in itself, getting it all out. And then what I will do is I will then go back to the top. I'll put some space between that and the top, or I'll put like a line of dashes and stuff, or like some emojis or something, just to separate it. And then at the very top I will then list 1 to 3 priority concerns, questions, symptoms, etc. that are plaguing me the most, instead of trying to cover everything. And this is because you don't know what time limit you're going to have in your appointment. You could have 5 minutes, you could have 10 minutes, you could have 15 minutes if you're lucky. And occasionally there's those rare unicorn appointments of 30 minutes. That has been at my GP practice. I've had a couple of 30-minute appointments, and they have been so helpful and so good, where I've been able to go through the whole list, especially when I've had a really good doctor. But those 30-minute appointments are like unicorns. I haven't had one since 2024 been able to get a 30-minute appointment. They have been like 10-15 minute appointments, if that. And even then I feel like sometimes they just quickly want to get you out the door because they're running behind. Having that list makes it easier, and makes it easier for you to focus and know what you need to say, and what you don't really have to go in there remembering anything, because it's on your phone. You can just pull it out. In the past I have written questions in my notebook and then put them in my phone, because I am kind of a bit of a pen and paper that helps my brain. But I just find it's just easier to just do it on my phone. One of the things related to that is that obviously, even if we have a list in front of us, we're not going to say everything right. We're not going to say everything perfectly. We're not going to say everything right. We're not going to say everything perfectly. We're not going to say everything that's on the list either, even if we have the time and the space and a really good doctor or consultant, where there's something still gonna get missed, and that's totally okay. We need to release the pressure of that we put on ourselves for everything to go right or perfect or okay or to be super happy with it. There have been so many times I've left an appointment and been like, oh, I forgot to say that, and then beat myself up, or I forgot that really important symptom, or I forgot this, and I've just like piled a load of negativity on myself, and instead of been like, oh, it's done, it's happened, we did the best, let's move on. And that's the attitude that I now take, because I've been doing this for 20 plus years technically. It does get to be at the point where you have to decide what's worth agonizing over, and sometimes getting those things right, remembering everything, isn't something to worth stressing about. It's not good for your health when you're already not well. So as I said, bringing notes can be super helpful. Questions, notes, symptoms, lists, whatever works for you. And another big thing, or the second big thing really, would be support. If it's at all possible, taking somebody with you, whether it's a family member, a partner, a close friend, somebody that you just really gel with really well, even a housemate. Just taking someone with you can be really, really good. So as I said, I have been diagnosed with my chronic illness 20 years this year in 2026. So it's been a really long journey, and I have taken pretty much nearly most of my family with me to my appointments, whether it's GP or whether it's the hospital, or I've taken most of my family members. I've been really very lucky in the fact that I met my husband my husband and I started dating the year I got diagnosed. So my husband has been through the whole thing with me, so he knows everything probably better than I do by now, and he has been super supportive. I'm very lucky. I've not only had a supportive partner, but I've had a supportive family, parents, in-laws, and that has been really good. I've taken my mum to appointments with me, and if it wasn't for my mum, I wouldn't have probably got diagnosed when I did. So my mum has been advocating for me for a very long time, and is always sending me articles and links to things. Even nowadays, she is very much, researching and advocating and trying to help me to the best of her ability, and it's amazing. My dad has gone to many hospital appointments with me. He's driven me to different clinics and hospitals and things when he was still with us, and my stepdad has as well done similar things, been to hospital appointments with me as well, and father-in-law as well has come to a couple of hospital appointments with me, possibly my mother-in-law, I can't remember. My sister-in-law, one of my sister-in-laws has come to an appointment with me as well. So I'm very, very lucky, and my husband has a very big family, so they're all very supportive, because as I said, I've been with my husband the whole way through it. Everyone's great, and I'm very blessed and lucky. I know that, for having them to come with me. As I said, having support can really be helpful. When I was younger, not knowing what to say, getting dismissed because I was young, and not being believed because of my symptoms was extremely difficult when I went to solo appointments on my own. Between the years of 16 and 19, the amount of times that I was like, it's just a bad period, you just have to man up, you just have to suck it up, try this pill, try that pill, you're just gonna have to adjust. And the majority of them were all male doctors. Eventually you get the hang of advocating for yourself and standing up for yourself. It can be really hard at first, it can be really difficult, but eventually you just have to do it. But having that support can be really helpful, especially if you're having a doctor or a consultant who is a bit more blasé, or is a bit of a gaslighter, or just isn't very understanding, or they're feeling rushed and pressed and they're not listening to you properly. It can be very difficult, and having support there can be really helpful, because I found that having someone else with you makes them pay more attention and slow down and be more with you in that appointment, I suppose. So I've got two examples. One of them is literally just a couple of weeks ago. Well, it'll be about a month ago when this video goes live. In January, I had a consultant appointment for something that was ongoing over the December period with my health. That was a sudden random thing. My husband rearranged his work schedule, so he was able to come to the appointments with me because he wanted to come, because it was very sudden and we didn't know what was going on and stuff like that, and he wanted to support me. And he came with me to the appointment. The first appointment, I was like, I can do it on my own, you don't need to come. But he arranged it and he came with me, and I was like, the first appointment was fine. I was like, you don't need to come to the second appointment with me. And he's like, no, I'm going to. And then I was like, yeah, you know what, actually come with me to the appointment, because I feel like I'm gonna get screwed over. And he came with me. The consultant was perfectly fine, that wasn't the issue at all. It was just the getting my symptoms across properly. And having my husband there in that appointment was really, really helpful, because the consultant was just saying so many medical terms, so much medical language that I didn't understand, that I just turned to my husband and just pulled a face, and he ended up like stepping in and helping me out and being really supportive. And I'm really grateful because he got the consultant to change what he was saying, because at the time as well I was in that process of trying to make a decision in that short time and understand everything that's going on, which I'm going to talk about further down in this video. But that was really difficult, and I just needed to take a pause and not be part of the conversation while I was trying to process. And then the other one is, quite a few years ago now, I had a consultant that he didn't think my issue was in his department, and he kept trying to pass me off back to gynecology, and gynecology were like, we don't deal with that area, that is completely yours and you have to sort it out. And he just really didn't want to deal with me, and I found dealing with him very difficult. My husband couldn't attend an appointment with me, he couldn't get time off work, I rearranged his shift. So my brother-in-law and his fiance were coming up to stay with us, and I messaged her in advance and was like, hey, I have this appointment coming up, do you mind coming to the appointment with me? You don't have to say anything, I just need you to come with me and be, you know, my backup and be my support in that appointment with me. And surprise, surprise, even having somebody else that didn't say anything in the appointment with me, he was so much nicer to me and so less need to get rid of you kind of thing. And that made it so much better for me. Asking for clarification when they're using medical language and complicated terms that we don't understand, there is no shame in asking for clarification, asking them to dumb it down, asking them to explain it in a way that you can understand, because that's their job. We didn't go to medical school, we didn't learn all these things unless we're personally researching things, and then maybe we'll come across a term, but it doesn't mean we're going to remember it or really understand what it means. So don't feel the shame when you need to get them to clarify or re-explain things, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I've had some really great consultants over the years that have actually gone and drawn diagrams for me, and that have been so helpful for me to understand what was going on when I didn't really understand, because I don't really know how body parts line up internally. That's not my job, and it's not something that I really want to spend a lot of time thinking about, because I'm spending enough time in pain and stuff anyway. So asking for clarification, if they're shaming you for it, if they're shaming you for asking them to dumb it down, to explain it in a way you can understand, that's on them, and the shame is on them, not on you. It's absolutely not your fault. And then the last one for preparing, advocating and processing them emotionally is actually the emotional preparation. So whether or not you are going to your very first appointment, or you've been doing this for as long as I have, if not even longer, you will know that certain feelings will arise before the appointment, and they can range from anxiety to fear to dread to hope to excitement, thinking good things, thinking bad things. And I am a massive journaler, and so I will have a bit of time before that appointment. Maybe it's a couple of days before, the day before, the morning before, depending what time the appointment is, and I'll pull out my journal and just be like, I'm feeling really anxious, quite a lot of dread or annoyance, and then be like digging deep into why I'm feeling that way, and if there's anything I can do to counteract that feeling, or to balance it out, or to just be like, right, I'm feeling this way, there is nothing wrong with me feeling this way, because I've had a bad appointment with this consultant in the past, so I'm not holding my hopes up for a good one this time. And that doesn't mean they were bad. Technically, it could have just been a bad appointment because you didn't get the results or the conversation that you really hoped for. Whereas there can be the other side where you could be like, oh, I had a really great appointment last time, I'm super excited for this one, I'm really hopeful, everything went well last time, I'm really expecting it to go the same again this time. And you know, whatever emotion you're feeling before is completely valid, and there's nothing wrong with you feeling that way, but exploring it a bit more could be more helpful to you and to help you understand why you're feeling that way, and if there's anything you can do to make yourself feel better before the appointment. So the last thing, very quickly, is that preparation for your appointment is about support, and it's not necessarily support of people around you. If you can take somebody with you to appointment, great, but if you can't, that support is still coming from yourself, making those lists, exploring your emotions, checking in on yourself, you know, making sure that you know what you want to say to your person, your specialist, your consultant, your doctor, etc., and doing the best that you can in that moment. My second point is why appointments drain more than just your energy, and it's about cognitive load. It's going to be a really long one, but I promise it's really, really important and it's really valid, and I really hope you find this really helpful, because this is something that I've been learning over the years, because it is super valid and super important. So cognitive load is listening, responding, remembering and deciding, and we go through all of those in that 15-30 minute appointment, if we're lucky to get that 30 minutes. Remember, we go through all of those in a really, really short amount of time, and that can be really exhausting for us. And I want you to think of the cognitive load as how much mental effort your brain is carrying at once. And obviously in medical appointments, that load is often enormous, because especially with the chronic illness. So as I said, there's listening, responding, remembering and deciding. So I'm going to explore all those four with you briefly. And the first one is listening, and your brain is already under strain before you've even entered that appointment, because we've made all those notes, we're already overthinking, we're already in pain and not doing so great, and then we get to the appointment and we're listening to new information, we're listening to complex language and trying to understand it, and as I said, we're feeling maybe anxious and tired and in pain, and our brain is trying to process the medical terms, work out what matters and what's important, and your body is trying to notice what feels relevant to the conversation and what doesn't as well. And if you have brain fog, fatigue or pain, you basically go from a normal bandwidth to a very reduced bandwidth, and just listening can be really exhausting. And then there's responding. We're translating our lived experience into words, so we're trying to find the right words, we're trying to explain symptoms clearly, we're trying to be taken seriously, and we're trying to answer questions on the spot. And this can be especially hard when your symptoms fluctuate, your memory doesn't feel reliable, you're under pressure, and your body's doing real-time translation. You're having body sensations, you're dealing with a lot of language, you're trying to explain things, and you're self-editing as well, and that is a lot going on in that appointment. The third one is remembering, holding information while more keeps coming at us. So appointments require us to remember timelines of everything that's happened, to recall previous tests and treatments, and to keep track of what's being said right now. But chronic illness, like I said, comes with like brain fog, memory gaps, stress-related blanking. So your brain is juggling past information, present conversation, and the fear of forgetting important things. And so there is this constant background noise and tension within you in this appointment going, don't forget this, don't forget this, don't forget. And that is mentally draining. Even if nothing goes wrong in your appointment, it's very exhausting. And then we have the fourth one, which is making choices while you're dysregulated. So you might be asked to agree with tests, to choose between options, to pick the next steps, and to consult about the next step. And you've got to decide in the moment, but your decisions are hard when you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're emotionally activated, and you don't have all the information, and you're feeling like pieces are missing, and it's hard to make a decision. and that can trigger our nervous system, and that might make us feel like we're in fight mode where we're really defensive, or we're in flight mode where we're really overwhelmed, or we freeze and we just go blank and we're like, yet you're still expected to decide and make decisions. And that's a huge emotional and cognitive ask for anybody. So making decisions when your body is already under stress takes more out of you than you realise at the time. And when you leave the appointment feeling wiped out, it's not because you did anything wrong or you couldn't cope well, it's because your brain has been working so hard to listen, respond, remember and decide all in that short little bit of time. While managing your symptoms and emotions, it can be really difficult. And this is partly why notes and supportive people and having little bits of pauses in the conversation, and even follow-up emails or phone calls aren't weaknesses. They're ways of reducing your cognitive load and supporting you in a better way. So I also really want to talk about the emotional labour that goes into appointments as well. And emotional labour can be about being believed, dismissed and being vulnerable. I kind of think of emotional labour as the effort it takes to manage your feelings while also managing the interaction, and that labour can feel heavy even when nothing bad actually happens. So as we said, there's being believed, dismissed and vulnerable. And being believed, there's a quiet pressure to sound credible, to explain yourself clearly, to not exaggerate, to not be too emotional, and your body might be in pain, but your brain is like, are we being taken seriously? Have we said the right terms? Have we used the right terminology? Have we made ourselves clear? And that constant self-checking takes a lot of effort. There's being dismissed, and dismissal doesn't have to be dramatic to be exhausting either. It can be, you're having your symptoms minimized, concerns being brushed past, and things reframed as anxiety or stress, and feeling rushed or unheard. When that happens, your nervous system often shifts into protection mode, defending yourself, shutting down, pushing harder than you meant to. Even in small moments of dismissal, it can be emotionally draining because they're asking you to either fight your feelings or to swallow what you're feeling, and either option costs a lot of energy. The third one is being vulnerable. We are in appointments that ask for a kind of vulnerability that isn't particularly gentle. We're sharing personal details, we're talking about blood and pain and bodily functions, and we're naming fears and uncertainties, and we're exposing parts of our life we don't usually share. And we're doing that with somebody who is most likely a stranger. We've never met them before. This is the first time we've seen them. And talking about these private parts that we don't talk to other people other than like the important people in our lives can be really scary and really hard. And we're talking to somebody who actually holds power over our health and our care and the kind of help we can receive. And sometimes we are also working within a system that isn't always kind to us either. And being open about our body and our life takes a lot of energy, especially in spaces where it doesn't feel fully safe. So appointments aren't just physically tiring, they're emotionally tiring too. There's the hope of being believed, handling dismissal if that happens, and we all know how draining that can be when it does, and being vulnerable in a place that can feel unsafe. And so if you feel emotional or flat after an appointment and that happens, it does not mean you overreacted at all. It just means that you did a lot of unseen work. And then there is the power dynamics between medical professionals. So I could go into this really deeply, but I'm not going to. But I just want to say that the person you're speaking to has a lot of authority. They're also dealing with time pressures, and they're controlling your next steps. And while you're sharing valuable information from a tired and unwell body, it can be hard to have a good interaction sometimes. Even when the interaction is kind, that imbalance between you and them can be really stressful and draining. I know many times in the past that even just the fact that an appointment's run an hour and a half late can make me feel really stressed and crappy before I've even stepped into the room to talk to the consultant, and that can have a negative effect with it as well. And then a really big one that I don't think a lot of people are aware of or realise is there's a grief trigger, and appointments can remind you that, you know, these symptoms are actually happening every single day. They can kind of be a bit of an, oh, okay, yep, that's still happening, that hasn't changed kind of thing. And that the answers might not be as clear as we want them to be. There isn't actually, the next step isn't going to resolve what's going on. And you're going to still be like this for maybe a while longer or even forever. And they can bring up feelings of loss and disappointment, and it can make it worse when there's the gap between where you are and where you hoped to be after and during like that appointment. Never mind the gap where you actually are and where you wanted to be in life. But just in that appointment, it can be really hard that there's where you are and where you hoped you were going to be or get to be post-appointment. And holding that emotionally can be really tiring and draining. Even if the appointment goes well and fine, it can still bring up feelings of sadness and loss and disappointment because you've had to regurgitate everything you've gone through again still. And even then, it can still be hard. And there's, you know, nothing wrong with feeling the way you feel. And even if you have been through something traumatic in the past, bringing that up again can trigger grief about it. Even if you've worked through it and thought everything was perfectly fine and okay, it can still happen. It's not always apparent that there is a grief trigger or that it can be pressed and set you off. For an example, in 2025, I was having some gallbladder issues. My doctor referred me to the hospital, and I thought I was, as my doctor said, I was being referred to just discuss symptoms and ways to manage it. And I got a letter saying surgery appointment, and I was like, okay, this is not what we discussed. But I went into it you know, open and able to go with the flow. I wasn't against anything. My only concern at the time was a timeline of what was going on with other health things and stuff, whether that would disrupt other things. And I went into the appointment. It was a very nice consultant. He was brilliant. He was very kind. He was very patient. He was very understanding. He listened to everything. But I think he was there with the purpose of, you have to have surgery. And so that was what he was really going for. And if I didn't have surgery, these are all the side effects of what could happen. And if I did have surgery, that's great. But still, these are side effects of what could happen after the surgery. All I went in for was my gallbladder, and he was on about removing it. And that's fine. It's a totally standard procedure, no issues. But sepsis got brought up. And if you don't know, you probably are not aware, in 2016 I had a really big endometriosis removal surgery. I ended up spending an extra week in the hospital because I needed a blood transfusion, and it was a really big surgery, so it was a big recovery. I went home to recover. I thought I'd pulled my stitches. It turned out it was an infection. I had antibiotics. I went home. It was Christmas, and I got sepsis, and I had to go back into hospital, and I spent a month in hospital, and I nearly died. And I thought I'd worked through it. I'd even done therapy this year to work through it some more, because just some other things came up that kind of like made me talk about it. And I thought I'd worked through it and was in a good place, but his mention of sepsis really triggered me. And then I was a big ball of anxiety and mess pre-surgery. Even though it's a standard normal procedure, it just was difficult for me deal with. And at the time I was really glad that I was in therapy and I could continue to work through it through therapy as well, because as I said, it was a big ball of anxious mess and it was really difficult, and I thought I'd worked through that grief trigger, but I hadn't. And the irony in a sense is that that was my endometriosis surgery was my third surgery. I then went on to have another 2 surgeries after that for something else completely kind of related but different in a different area. And so this was it would have been 3 surgeries. So this was my 7th surgery, and it was like my 4th one after that big surgery where I got sepsis. So I'd been through other surgeries and things, but just because the other surgeries hadn't mentioned sepsis or anything, they just used the word infection. But using the word sepsis was really triggering and it was very difficult. And then there was all that afterwards. There was that crash, a post-surgery crash of, adrenaline drop, because nothing awful and really bad actually happened. Like, I didn't get on very well with the anaesthetic, but you know, that can happen. But there was like a shoulders being able to slump kind of thing. There was less tension afterwards, and there was, you know, an understanding that that's a grief trigger that might get pressed again in the future as well, and being aware that that could come up again, even though I've worked through it and I feel okay about it in this moment in time again, but you never know what's going to set you off. And mentioning that crash and that kind of like slump, there is a crash that can come post appointments that comes from adrenaline and masking and hope. And so appointments can run on that mix of adrenaline, masking and hope, because you might push through your pain or fatigue to stay focused and stay together and hold on to the hope that this appointment might help you to move things forward. And when that's over, that adrenaline drops and the masking isn't needed anymore, and whatever you're holding back can surface to the top, and that's when the crash can hit physically, emotionally, or both, and can feel sudden or confusing, especially if you weren't expecting it to happen. So masking, because we've just mentioned it, I want to mention it in regard to appointments, and I suppose in an aspect of chronic illness, the way that we can mask ourselves. It can be managing how you appear so you can get through the interaction, and I don't mean in the sense of, you know, doing your makeup and your hair and putting on some nice clothes. I mean, it can look like hiding our pain and our fatigue and our brain fog, whether that's with makeup or not, or with, you know, trying to look presentable. It can be internal, where we're trying to like grit our teeth, bite our tongues, stick our nails into our fingers to get through the pain while we're having this appointment and conversation. It can be trying to appear calmer, clearer and more together than you actually feel. It could be downplaying some of your symptoms just so you don't be seen as dramatic and playing it up. It could be staying polite and agreeable when you really want to yell or scream or argue back with what they're saying. And it could even be doing that when you're feeling uncomfortable. And it's pushing yourself to focus, to sit upright and to keep the conversation going and to keep up with it. And you're not doing this to be dishonest. You're doing it to be taken seriously, to move things forward and to survive the interaction. And this can be exhausting when you're masking, because you're constantly monitoring yourself. You're suppressing your natural responses, your pain, your confusion and the emotions that you're feeling. And you're staying alert and on when your body just really wants to rest. But it's a form of self-protection, but it costs us a lot. And the crash that happens after all of that doesn't mean you coped badly or that you exaggerated or you weren't strong enough. It just means you stopped performing once it was safe to do so. If you fall apart a bit afterwards, it's not a weakness. Just think of it as your body exhaling and taking a big breath, because it's not just an appointment, it's a full-on body experience. And the third and final part of appointments is aftercare matters just as much as the appointment itself. Aftercare works the best really when it's planned before the appointment happens, and it's not added in after the appointment when you feel bad afterwards and realize that, oh yeah, I actually need some space, some time, some, as we're calling it, aftercare. Because knowing that you can rest after that appointment, whether that's going home or knowing that you have nothing else scheduled, or just knowing that you can go and relax in your car for a little bit or something, can make the appointment itself feel more manageable. It also removes the pressure to push on afterwards, because rest was already part of your plan for that day post-appointment. And I want you to think that rest isn't a reaction to the appointment, it's part of the appointment. So there's emotional decompression, which is obviously crying and venting. It could be silence, it could be journaling, it could be meditating, it could be gaming, it could be reading, whatever it is that you feel like you need to do post-appointment, which you may not actually really know what you'll need to do until after the appointment, but just knowing that you've made space for that to happen is perfectly okay. Because appointments bring up a lot of emotions that don't have space to be felt in the room. There can be fear, there can be anger, there can be relief, there can be disappointment, there can be hope, so many different emotions. And emotional decompression is about letting some of that out in whatever way feels safe for you. That might be crying, talking it through with somebody, sitting in silence, writing, meditating, zoning out with a game or a book. There is no right way, it's whatever works for you and helps your nervous system. There have been quite a few times I've left an appointment and not realised that there was the crash and the emotional decompression happening at the same time for me, and I've left appointments just crying because they've not gone well at all, and just being so overwhelmed and exhausted and not really understanding why. And that's partly why I really wanted to do this video and this series. And now understanding that I need to give my nervous system a release, and that the aftercare, the space after the appointment, is really, really important. So one of the ways that you can do it is by having some sort of nourishment, whether it's food, warmth, comfort, some sort of familiarity for you can really help. Because after an appointment, the body often needs just something simple and familiar for us. So whether that's eating something nourishing, getting warm under a blanket and a hot water bottle or an electric blanket, being comfortable, surrounding yourself with familiar things can help signify that you're now safe. And that kind of nourishment isn't a bad thing, it's about helping your body settle after the stress that you've been through in that appointment. So I want you to think of food and warmth and comfort equals something regular, not something indulgent. A regular thing post appointments and not an indulgence. So for example, sometimes after an appointment I've just had a big cuddle with my mum or my husband, and that has just reiterated to myself that I'm safe, that everything's going to be okay, and has been really comforting for me. A couple of times we have gone out to eat somewhere that we've eaten before that we like, or we've gone to a new place, but we've had something that we like a lot, like burgers. I remember leaving one appointment, we'd gone in really excited, really hopeful, really good, and we'd come out, I'd cried, we'd had a hug, and we'd had a walk and a talk, which is one of the things that we do. And then we'd gone for burgers and it was within our plan. It was all within our plan, because we were kind of thinking that it was going to go well, so we were going to have a walk and talk about the good part of it, and then we were going to go eat burgers because we like burgers, and it was all part of the plan. And then we had rest in the post burgers when we got home and stuff. It didn't go to plan, and so you know what, those plans it didn't go to plan in the appointment, so those plans we made after the appointment were really vital and really important and really help. And another thing post appointments is reducing decisions and expectations for the rest of the day. As we've said, appointments use up so much mental and emotional energy, which means decision making can feel even harder afterwards, and you're processing everything that went on. So reducing expectations for your plans, for your choices, for your demands can help prevent overload and from us shutting down, because every small decision can feel really, really heavy after an appointment. So simplifying the rest of the day is a form of self-care. And then there is letting the appointment land instead of rushing back to normal, taking some time, taking some space, because it can take time for the appointment to land mentally and emotionally and even physically in our bodies. And rushing straight back into a normal life afterwards can mean we're pushing feelings or information that we need to process further down the line, and that isn't always healthy for us or good. And so that might look like post-appointment letting what was said in the appointment land. It might be sitting with it, noticing how you feel about it all, or giving yourself a bit of space before you respond and act and make any decisions, because the pause can be just as important as the appointment itself. And I've had this in the past where even in 2025 I had, was it in September, I'd literally had the gallbladder surgery, was recovering, had another appointment. It was digital, like it was on video call appointment, and I was like, I'm still recovering from this surgery. I need to discuss it with my husband. I can't make a decision properly right now. I just need a bit of space and time. And so I gave myself time to have that space to really process the decisions that I would have to make. I just want to reiterate that aftercare, this self-care, this time and space after an appointment is not indulgent. I think it is very valid and very necessary, because aftercare isn't about doing more, it's about creating a space for your body and your nervous system to recover. So my reflective question for you to think about is, what do I need before and after medical appointments, emotionally and practically? There is no right answer, just notice what comes up. And if I was going to give you one little tip for grounding yourself before and after an appointment, it's just to take 1 to 2 or 3 deep breaths, however many you feel, before the appointment and after the appointment, to help ground yourself and your nervous system. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And just a very gentle reminder, please take what's helpful and leave the rest. I'll see you next time. Bye.